The dare started as a comment and became a crowd. That is how these things work. One person says something sharp enough to draw attention, and attention is its own kind of invitation. Solomon Vance was standing near the back of the reception hall at the Magnolia House Event Center on Harding Pike, holding a plastic cup of sparkling cider, wearing the grey sport coat from 3 years ago that was still pressed and slightly short in the sleeve. His daughter, Cora, 7 years old, sat on a folding chair beside him with a paper plate of petit fours balanced on her knees and her mother's thin gold bracelet, the one with the tiny blue bead, looped twice around her wrist because her wrist was still too small for it. Cora was watching the dance floor with the focused attention she brought to most things. The woman who started it was named Diane Holloway. She was the mother of the groom, wore a cream blazer and a pearl choker, and had a way of standing at the edge of a room that suggested she had built the room. She had looked at Solomon twice before she spoke, once when he arrived and once when he accepted a second plate from a caterer, and both times she had looked the way people do when they are confirming something they already believe. The DJ had opened the floor for general dancing. The song was fast. Most of the room was up. Diane Holloway said, across the table, loud enough for the table and the 2 nearest tables to hear, "They should put your name in the mix, too. Unless this kind of music isn't really your speed," she said it pleasantly. That was the skill of it. The smile was present, the chin was up. The woman beside her, in a navy dress, a second glass of Prosecco, laughed. Not a cruel laugh. The comfortable laugh of someone who is not the target. One of the groomsmen, young, loosened tie, caught it and smiled the way people smile when they want to be part of something without being responsible for it. Someone else said, "Yeah, come on, man, get out there." It spreads the way things spread at weddings, when the alcohol is doing its work and the hour is late, and people are looking for something to watch. By the time 4 people had added their voices, some encouraging, some edged, the difference blurring together, and it had become the kind of social moment that has a direction, an expectation, an audience. Solomon stood where he was. He did not look at Diane Holloway. He looked at the dance floor for a moment, then down at Cora. Cora looked up at him. She was holding a petit four she hadn't eaten yet. She said, quiet and direct, "Are you going to dance, Daddy?" He said, "Yeah." She put the petit four on the plate very carefully. She said, "I'll watch." He handed her his cup of cider and straightened his jacket and walked out onto the floor. The song that was playing had maybe 90 seconds left in it. He stood at the edge of the moving bodies for 2 full beats. He found the pocket inside the rhythm. Not the downbeat, not the obvious pulse, but the space between, the breath the song was taking, that almost no one else in the room had found. His weight shifted, his feet settled, then he began. By the time the song ended, the floor had cleared around him. Not because anyone moved on purpose, because the space rearranges itself without instruction, when something real is happening at the center of it. The next song started. He stayed. Diane Holloway's smile was still in place. Then it wasn't. The room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet, when they have forgotten to keep doing the thing they were doing. The DJ, a young man in his 20s, who had been watching from behind his equipment, let the next song play but turned down the volume, just slightly, without being asked. No one on the floor was moving but Solomon. He danced the full length of that second song. When it ended, the applause started in 4 places at once and could not be contained. He straightened his jacket. He walked back to the table. He picked up his cider from Cora. She said, "I told you." He said, "You did." His name is Solomon Vance, and he has been waking at 4:47 in the morning for 11 years. Not because an alarm tells him to, because the apartment is its quietest then, and the quiet is when he does the work that cannot be done with anyone watching. He lives on the 3rd floor of a building on Collier Street in East Nashville. The building has a radiator that announces itself every evening, and a parking lot light that flickers, and neighbors who say his name when they pass him in the hall. His car is a 2014 Honda Accord, the color of old pewter. There is a crack in the passenger side rear-view mirror from the day 4-year-old Cora dropped a library book from the back seat at the exact wrong angle. He has never replaced it. Every morning at 4:47, he fills a pale blue mug with a chip in the handle and stands at the kitchen window and watches the parking lot. He does this for 6 minutes. He does not think about anything in particular. It does not look like grief from the outside. From the outside, it looks like a man drinking coffee. It is also a man drinking coffee. The two things are not in conflict. Then he goes to the cleared space in the living room, the coffee table pushed aside, the rug rolled back, and he moves for 45 minutes. Not to music most mornings, to the rhythm he carries. He works through the sequences the way a person works through a language they do not want to forget, phrase by phrase, muscle by muscle, until the body has remembered what the day is about to ask it to set aside. No one sees this. He does not do it to be seen. Cora has her mother's hands. Wide palm, fingers that spread when she reaches for something, as if measuring the space before committing. She also has, for reasons beyond explanation, Renee's habit of humming 3 specific notes when she concentrates. Not a song, not anything identifiable, just 3 notes, in a particular order that Solomon recognized the first time Cora produced them, when she was not quite 3 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor trying to fit the lid back on a container. He left the room. He stood in the hallway for a moment with his hand flat on the wall. Then he came back and helped her with the lid. He has never pointed the humming out to her. He is not sure what he would say if she asked how he knew it. Renee died 4 years ago, 31 years old. The details of how are not the point of this story, and Solomon does not make them the point of any story. What remains is the photograph on the bookshelf, her head thrown back, laughing at something off frame, taken at a pier in Wilmington on a Tuesday in October, and the bracelet too big for Cora's wrist and the 3 notes. That is plenty. That is in fact more than enough to carry a life forward. He drops her off at Whitmore Elementary at 7:45. She gets out the same way every morning, door opened from the inside, backpack retrieved in one pull, one look back through the window before she goes. Not a wave, just a look. He looks back. Then she goes in. This is its own ritual. It holds its own weight. He does not examine it. The lunch he packs for her is always the same core, turkey on wheat, an apple cut into eighths, because she will not eat a whole one, a small container of peanut butter for dipping, and a note written on a piece of the brown paper bag he cuts into squares and keeps in the junk drawer. The notes say different things. Sometimes a fact about an animal she mentioned the night before. Sometimes a drawing of a poorly rendered horse that she has critiqued accurately as not looking like a horse. Sometimes just a sentence, good luck on the test. He started the notes when she began first grade, and he does not think of stopping them. Solomon has worked with the Tennessee Arts Workforce Development Program for 6 years. His business card says Program Coordinator, which is accurate, just as saying a sculptor uses tools is accurate. What he does is find young people between 14 and 22 who are somewhere between gifted and self-destructing, and build the architecture around them. Grant applications, studio time. The mentorship pipelines that connect a teenager from a South Nashville high school to a working professional in a city they have never visited. He identifies what is missing between the talent and the opportunity, and he fills it in, quietly, without announcing that this is what he is doing. The people he helps win things, they stand at podiums. They thank their family, their faith, and the program. Solomon is usually in the back of the room. He is usually the one who drove them there. He does not find this arrangement unsatisfying. He finds it correct. Before this, he was a dancer. He trained at the American Dance Theater Intensive Program in Atlanta, beginning at 16, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day during the school year, and 6 hours a day through the summer, under a teacher named Dwight Okafor, who had himself trained under members of Alvin Ailey's company, and who communicated technical correction through a kind of patient relentlessness that Solomon did not fully appreciate until he was 23, and trying to teach someone else the same things. He spent 2 years with the Meridian Collective, a contemporary company based in Philadelphia, touring regionally, performing at mid-size venues in cities along the East Coast, doing the specific work of a young professional dancer, which is to say the creative work and also the physical labor, the ice baths, and the physiotherapy, and the diet and the sleep schedules, the life organized entirely around what the body needs to perform. A knee injury ended his performing career at 26. The details: a misstep during a technical rehearsal in Baltimore, a partial tear of the anterior cruciate ligament, surgery, 8 months of rehabilitation, and then the slow understanding, delivered not by a doctor but by his own body during a rehearsal he attempted before he was ready, that performing at that level was no longer available to him in the same way. He did not perform publicly after that. He went toward the other work: choreography consultation, movement coaching for Division I athletes at a university in Charlotte, curriculum design for arts programs in schools where the arts budget had been reduced to a single period per week. The knee healed to about 90%, which is enough for a 45-minute morning session in a living room, but not enough for the demands of professional contemporary performance. He has made a clear-eyed peace with that distinction. Most days it simply is what it is. Some days it is a thing he does not look at directly, the way you don't look directly at the one light in a room that is slightly too bright. There is a colleague named Priya Mehta, 4 years at Arts Workforce, who is the most competent person Solomon has worked alongside in his professional life. She once told him in the parking lot, after a particularly long grant review meeting, that his ability to be in a room full of people who were wrong about him without correcting them was either the most disciplined thing she had ever seen or a clinical condition she wasn't qualified to name. He said he appreciated the ambiguity. She said that was exactly what she meant. The project currently occupying the margins of Solomon's professional life is called the Meridian Bridge Initiative. It is a partnership between Arts Workforce and a Philadelphia residency organization called Frame Collective, built by former members of the same Meridian Collective, where Solomon spent 2 years in his 20s. The initiative will bring 6 emerging Nashville artists, aged 17 to 24, to fully funded 2-year residencies in Philadelphia. The grant is worth $430,000. The application went before the Frame Collective board, 2 weeks before the wedding. The decision has not yet come. He mentioned it to Cora once briefly to explain the late Thursdays. She was eating cereal. She looked at him and said, "Like what you did for Jasmine." Jasmine was a 21-year-old dancer, formerly housed in a youth shelter, currently on a national tour with a contemporary company out of Chicago. Solomon had spent 11 months building the application that got her there. "Yes," he said. "Like that." She nodded and went back to her cereal. Then after a moment, "Do you miss dancing?" He looked at her. "I dance all the time," he said. "I mean for people." He thought about it, the way he thinks about things she asks that deserve a real answer. "Sometimes," he said. She said, "I think you should." He said, "Maybe." She said, "I think you're good at it." He washed his mug and got her backpack. And they went through the morning the way they always do. The wedding was for Terence Cole, 26, a former mentee. Solomon had helped Terence navigate a grant rejection from the Tennessee Arts Council 3 years ago, helped him reframe and resubmit, and the resulting approval had led. In a chain of professional events Solomon had not predicted or engineered, but was not entirely surprised by, to a studio residency in Germantown and a life that looked measurably different from the one Terence had been heading toward. Terence had sent a handwritten note when the acceptance came. He had also, apparently, put Solomon on the wedding guest list. Solomon came because it mattered to him to show up for people who had shown up for him. He brought Cora because Terence had specifically asked, having met her twice at the Arts Workforce office holiday party, and apparently found her correctly, worth knowing. Diane Holloway had organized the wedding with the precision of a person for whom organizing is a form of authority. She had selected the venue, approved the florals, and reviewed the DJ's playlist. She had also, without announcing it, compiled a working mental inventory of every guest and their relationship to the occasion. And she had done this inventory the way people do, when they believe that belonging is a quality distributed unevenly, and that they are qualified to assess it. What she had seen when she looked at Solomon, the older coat, the modest plate, the child too young to be there without the other parent. The posture of a man who seemed comfortable in a room where he knew almost no one. She had reached a conclusion without taking any additional steps. She was not, it should be said, a simple person. She had lived in Nashville for 42 years. She had raised 2 children, buried a husband, sat on 3 boards, and built a social position through genuine, sustained work. Her opinions about rooms and people were not random. They were constructed from years of reading situations accurately and acting on them effectively. This time, the construction was wrong. The materials were right. She was looking at the coat, the shoes, the body language, the cup of cider instead of wine. She was just looking at a surface and calling it the whole. The early part of the evening, she managed through what she would have called, if pressed, attentiveness. A comment delivered at a slight angle towards Solomon about the importance of the occasion. A conversation near him about events requiring a certain kind of preparation. A hand gesture that redirected a caterer without touching anyone. Solomon ate his food, talked with Terence, held Cora's hand through the first dances, and said nothing. Cora finished 2 petit fours and learned the word ranunculus from a florist collecting empty table arrangements. She said it several more times under her breath, on the way back to their table, the way she does with words she intends to keep. The DJ opened the floor at 9. The song was fast, and the floor filled immediately with the joyful imprecision of a crowd that has been drinking steadily since cocktail hour. The dancing was the kind that happens at most weddings, enthusiastic, approximate, sustained by the proximity of people who are happy rather than by anything they have been taught. Diane Holloway stood at the edge of the floor with a fresh glass of champagne and watched it with the satisfaction of a person whose DJ selection was performing as intended. Then she looked at Solomon, standing at the back table, with Cora beside him, and she said it. Loud enough for the tables to hear, warm enough to retain plausible deniability. They should put your name in the mix too, unless this kind of music isn't really your speed. The woman in the navy dress laughed. The groomsman with the loosened tie caught it and smiled. Someone 3 feet away added their voice, encouraging, edged, the tone blurring where those two things meet. By the time 4 people had leaned in, the comment had become something with more than one author. It had an audience, it had a direction. It was whether or not anyone at the table was willing to call it what it was, a dare. Solomon looked at the dance floor for one breath. Then he looked at Cora. She looked back at him, and she said, quiet and completely certain, "You should do it, Daddy." He handed her the cider and straightened the grey coat and walked out. What he did not do, in the 3 hours before that moment and in the moment itself, was explain anything. He did not tell Terence, who would have told him immediately. I danced professionally. I trained for a decade. I spent 2 years performing with a company in Philadelphia. He did not say to Diane Holloway or to the table anything at all. There is a version of this story in which Solomon announces himself, and the evening goes differently. That story does not interest him. It has never interested him. He knows something she does not. He waits. The waiting is not a weakness. The waiting is the whole point. To understand what the room was about to see, you need to understand something about trained movement and what it looks like in a room full of people who have never seen it up close. Most people dance from the outside in. The arms lead, the hips follow. The feet find a beat and return to it like a safe harbor. This is not a failure. This is how bodies move when movement has never been their primary language, when no one has ever asked the body to be precise about the thing it already knows how to do. Solomon Vance learned to move from the inside out when he was 16 years old in a studio on Peachtree Street in Atlanta under Dwight Okafor, who had trained under members of Alvin Ailey's company, and who believed with the intensity of a person who has given a life to something that the body already contains everything it needs to know. The work of a dancer, Okafor said, is not to learn new movements. It is to stop lying about the ones you already have. For 2 years, Solomon lied to it, the way every student does, presenting the shapes the teacher described instead of finding them from the inside. The lie looked correct. It was technically adequate. Okafor could tell. Okafor always could tell. Then, in a rehearsal on a Thursday afternoon in Solomon's 2nd year, something stopped. The lying stopped. His body moved the way Okafor had been describing for 2 years, from the breath outward, from the center into the limbs, finding not the beat but the space inside it, the inhalation the music takes between sounds. Okafor stopped the rehearsal. He looked at Solomon for a moment. He said, in the voice he used when he was not performing the instruction but simply stating a fact, "There it is." That was 23 years ago. Solomon has not moved from any other place since, even in a living room at 4:40 in the morning, with the coffee table pushed aside and nobody watching. The Meridian collective years added a different layer. Contemporary performance at that level is partly about technique and mostly about presence. The ability to be entirely inhabited in a moving body in front of an audience of strangers. The artistic director of the collective, a woman named Celeste Oduya, spent the first 3 months of Solomon's time with the company convincing him to stop managing his presence and let it exist. He was technically among the strongest dancers in the company, she told him, and the least watchable, because he was still performing competently rather than allowing it. When he finally stopped managing it, in a performance at the Annenberg Center in Philadelphia in the company's 2nd season, a reviewer for the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote that there was a young dancer in the ensemble whose name did not yet appear in room billing. who had the specific quality of making the audience feel they were watching something they were not supposed to see. Solomon keeps a copy of that review in the second drawer of his desk at the Arts Workforce Office, under the commendations and the grant confirmation letters. He has not read it in 3 years. He does not need to. He knows what it said. He has not performed publicly since the knee, which is to say he has not performed publicly in 14 years. The morning practice is not a performance. The movement coaching he does with athletes and young performers is not performance. What he does in the living room before the city wakes is the same thing he has been doing since he was 16, in the same language, from the same place. It simply has no audience. Until the Magnolia House Event Center on a Saturday night in late October, when a dare turned into something nobody in the room had prepared themselves to see. The floor cleared around him by the end of the first minute. No one directed it. The space arranged itself the way spaces do when something real is happening at the center of them. A woman in her 50s stopped dancing and put her hand on her chest, without appearing to notice she had done it. The wedding photographer, who had been framing a shot of Terence and Gabrielle near the cake table, turned and began shooting without being asked, moving slowly around the edge of the floor. The 3 teenage cousins of the groom, who had been holding their phones up since the dancing began, put them down. That last detail was perhaps the most significant of all. The DJ let the song play out. He brought up the next track at a slightly lower volume. Solomon stayed. He danced the full length of that second song, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He danced the way he dances at 4:47 in the morning, in his living room, with the coffee table pushed aside, which is to say without an audience in mind, which is to say completely. When it ended, the silence lasted 4 full seconds before the applause started. It started in 4 places at once and spread because it could not be stopped. Solomon straightened his jacket. He walked to the table. He picked up the cider from Cora's hands. She said, "I told you." He said, "You did." A man appeared on his shoulder within a minute. Late 50s jacket with a name tag that read Robert Park. He extended his hand and said, "I have to ask, where did you train?" Solomon shook it. "Atlanta," he said, "a long time ago, Meridian Collective after that." Robert Park looked at him with the expression of a person recalibrating. "Frame Collective," he said. "I'm on the board." Solomon looked at him. Robert Park said quietly, "We've been waiting on a decision about a Nashville application. I don't believe in coincidences." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card. Solomon took it. Neither of them said anything else about it. Terence was there 30 seconds later, slightly undone, and he said, "Sol, how long have you been here?" "Why didn't you ever?" Solomon said. "You never asked." Terence looked at him. Then he laughed, the specific helpless laugh of someone who has just understood something that was in front of them for years. Behind them, from a different position entirely, was the silence of a different kind. Not the applause kind. The kind that belongs to a person standing at the edge of something she expected to remain in the middle of. Diane Holloway held her champagne glass with both hands. She was looking at Solomon. The expression on her face had started as something else, and was in real time becoming something that did not yet have a name in her vocabulary for herself. Solomon did not hold her gaze. He turned to Cora and said, "How are you doing?" She said, "My feet hurt." He crouched down and looked at her shoes. "We'll leave soon," he said. She said, "Okay. Can I have one more petit four?" He looked at the dessert table. He looked back at her. "One," he said. She slid off the chair and went to get it. The bracelet sliding down her wrist as she reached, the tiny blue bead catching the light above the dessert table, and she selected her P4 with the careful deliberation of someone making a decision that matters. Diane Holloway drove home on Granny White Pike with the radio off. She had been in Nashville for 42 years. She had built a life here that was precise and defensible at every point. A life she had assembled through genuine effort and real intelligence, and the particular willingness to do the social work that other people outsourced. She sat on boards. She knew which people understood the weight of occasions. She had opinions about rooms. She had been in her own accounting reliable in those opinions. She thought about the woman who had stopped dancing and put her hand on her chest. She thought about the photographer crossing the floor without being directed. The lens moving toward the center of the room with the instinct that belongs to people who recognize something worth documenting. She thought about the teenagers putting their phones down. She thought about what she had said at the table. She replayed the words specifically. She did not reach for softer versions of them. The words had been precise. They had been aimed. She had looked at a man she did not know, and she had decided, from the coat and the shoes and the plate and the child, what he was and was not, and she had acted on that decision publicly and with an audience, and she had been, by every measure available to her now, completely wrong. She thought about the child, the one who had looked at him and said, with the certainty of someone stating a fact, "You should do it, Daddy." Not "you can do it," not "try it," should, because she already knew that child had known. And the child was 7 years old and wearing a bracelet that was too big for her wrist. Diane Holloway turned onto her street. She sat in the car for a moment after the engine went off. She did not cry. That is not who she is, and it would not have been adequate anyway. Crying releases something. What she was sitting with was not something that wanted to be released. It wanted to be held, examined, understood for what it was. She had spent the better part of a year in a building of assumptions about a man she had never spoken to. She had made those assumptions out loud to other people, more than once. The assumptions had felt, every time she had made them, like reasonable conclusions. They had been every time a story she told about a surface. She went inside. The porch light was on. The neighbor's oak had dropped another branch across the property line. She had been meaning to call about it for 3 weeks. She stood in her kitchen for a while. The reckoning does not arrive finished. It arrives as a question you keep picking up and putting down, the way you return to something in a room you keep almost saying aloud. On Tuesday of the week following the wedding, Solomon was in the arts workforce office at 7:30, 40 minutes before Priya usually arrived when his phone rang. Frame Collective on the screen, he answered it. He stood at the window looking out at the parking lot, and he listened for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Then he said, "Thank you. We'll be in touch about next steps." He put the phone in his pocket. He stood at the window a moment longer. Then he went to his desk and opened his laptop and began drafting the 6 individual emails to the 6 young people whose lives had, as of 3 minutes and 20 seconds ago, shifted. When Priya walked in at 8:10, she looked at him and said, "Why is your face doing that?" He turned the laptop toward her. She read the subject line. She read the first paragraph. She put her hand over her mouth. Then she took her hand away and said, "I'm getting coffee. Do not send anything until I come back." She came back with 2 cups. She sat down. She said, "Tell me," he told her. $430,000. 6 fully funded residency slots. Fall start date. Board approval unanimous. She said, "Robert Park." He looked at her. She said, "You danced at a wedding and Robert Park was there and he's on the Frame Collective board, and you are telling me that is a coincidence." He said, "I didn't know he'd be there." She said, "You never know anyone is anywhere. Things happen anyway." He looked at the window. She said, "I need you to understand that I am not going to let you be modest about this one." He said, "The work was what it was." She said, "Solomon." He said, "It was good work." She put her pen down and looked at him for a long time and then said, "Yes, it was." A formal commendation arrived from the Metro Arts Commission the following Friday. It was hand-signed by the director. Priya put it on his desk between the stapler and the spare charger. He read it once, folded it in thirds, and put it in the second drawer. He had a 9 o'clock call with the youngest of the 6 artists, a 17-year-old choreographer from Antioch named Destiny Ruiz, who had not yet been told. He called her. She answered on the second ring. He said, "Destiny, sit down first." She said, "Good or bad?" He said, "Sit down." She sat, he told her. She cried for nearly 2 minutes. He let her. When she came back, he said, "Are you ready to talk about what happens next?" She said, yes, I'm ready." He said, "Good." On a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the wedding, Solomon and Cora were at the kitchen table, working through multiplication tables when the downstairs buzzer sounded. He went to the intercom. A woman's voice said, "This is Diane Holloway from the wedding. I have something for a neighbor, but I think I have the wrong floor. And while I'm here, I made too much pound cake. Lemon, if you'd want any." He pressed the button for the downstairs door. She came up the stairs. She was wearing a muted burgundy blazer. She carried a dish covered in plastic wrap. He opened the door before she reached it. She looked at him and past him at Cora, who turned round and at her chair at the kitchen table and was looking at the stranger with the frank appraisal of a child who has not yet learned to make that look less obvious. Diane Holloway held out the dish. "Lemon pound cake," she said. "I always make too much." He took it. He looked at it for a moment. "You didn't have to," he said. She said, "I know." The silence between them was small and specific, not hostile, not comfortable. Something more honest than either of those. He said, "Do you want to come in for a minute?" Cora said, "From the table, we have coffee." Diane Holloway looked at Cora. Something moved through her face in a direction it had not gone before. Not at this speed, not for this reason. She said, "I'd like that. If it's no trouble." He stepped back. She came in. He went to the kitchen. From the other room he heard Cora's voice, unhurried. The way she always sounds when she has decided someone is worth the information. "Do you know what ranunculus is?" A pause. Then a woman's voice, careful, finding its footing. "I do you?" And Cora, "I learned them at the wedding. They were in the centerpieces." Another pause. "Quieter." "They were," Diane Holloway said. "I chose them." He stood at the kitchen counter. The coffee was ready. He filled 2 mugs, the blue one and the spare, and listened to the radiator in the pipes and watched the parking lot for a moment. In the way he does, not 6 minutes this time, just a moment, and then he carried the mugs to the table and sat down. Cora had already returned to her multiplication worksheet, pencil in hand, the small private hum starting up in her throat as she worked. 3 notes looping, not a song, not anything, everything. Diane Holloway looked at the bracelet on Cora's wrist, the thin gold one with the blue bead, and she did not ask about it. That was, perhaps, the first true thing she had understood about the room she was sitting in. That evening, after Cora was in bed, Solomon fixed the light in the hallway. It had been flickering for 2 months. The replacement bulb had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 3 weeks, next to the dish rack. He had walked past it every day and not touched it. He had not been ready, and he had not questioned that, and now he was. He got the step stool from the closet. He took the cloth from the junk drawer, the cloth kept specifically for hot bulbs, because Renee had told him to keep one there. Because she had thought of that kind of thing, the kind of thing that seems small until you need it. He unscrewed the old bulb. He held it in the cloth for a moment. Then he put it down and threaded in the new one, and stepped off the stool and flipped the switch. The hallway came on, steady and clean, no flicker. He stood in it for a moment. Down the hall, through the door that doesn't fully close because the hinge needs resetting, he could hear Cora's breathing, even and slow. He put the old bulb in the bag under the sink where the recyclables go. He folded the cloth and returned it to the junk drawer. He filled the blue mug one more time. He stood at the kitchen window, not for 6 minutes, just long enough to see the parking lot, the pewter car, the light above the lot that flickers but stays on. Then he turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hall to Cora's door. He pulled it as close to closed as the hinge allows. He did not look back at the light behind him. He already knew it was on.